But I get to work with a lot of our clients in actually identifying places where they can apply our technology. So I do a lot of workshops, process analysis stuff, things like that. My presentations tend to be pretty formal. So if you're thinking about, who is this guy up here, you might be thinking, hey, this guy's a total pro, or he's going to be totally serious the entire time. And you might also be wondering, why on earth is he carrying a grown man in a green bodysuit? A very, very good question, and one I can explain at some point after the session if you'd like to drill into it. In my role, I talk to probably about one different client company at least, not multiple, just like this for example, every week, which means I talk to lots and lots of different clients. And in that time, you'd think I'd have some pretty common questions that come up about what xMatters does, what we do. The most common question I actually get has nothing to do at all with our company. That has more to do with my name. The most common question that comes up at some point halfway through a meeting or at the very end, someone will raise their hand or ask someone else on my team the question you see up on the screen. Who is the boss? And it comes to my name. It's Abbas, and someone at some point will raise their hand and go, who is this boss you guys keep talking about in this meeting? And I've been talking at some point for 2 hours, and that's a question that comes up. And we normally go through this whole thing of, who is this Abbas guy to begin with? And we have to go ahead and explain how my name is actually spelled. Now, if you ask our European contingent, this is how they describe my name. It'll be like, think Abba, add an S at it. So apparently I'm a bunch of different Swedish musical groups. Now, if you throw out Abba, the most common thing you're going to get right afterwards as a starting point is, so what do you think of? That's pretty much my life. Every time you go through a meeting, that's pretty much exactly what goes down, right? That's what we go through every time. The other common things that I get is, hey, you look a lot like that guy from Harold and Kumar. That's the other one, which is a great rep to have, by the way. Or I get the Ray Romano, which is another one. True story, only place that's ever worked for me to get anything is at the Mixed Lounge at the Mandalay Bay. They had a closed party here a few years ago. I showed up, they're like, oh, sorry, we're closed. And they kind of hesitated. They said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you at first. It's like, damn right, I want to get in there right now. Never worked before, never worked since. This is actually one of my favorite spots to come in. It's actually, I tried again a couple of nights ago, no dice. Apparently my hair is too short or something, or it doesn't work anymore. I claim to be a Ray's Sicilian brother sometimes. But just a little bit about my background. I'm sure a lot of people get up here and you wonder kind of what is kind of their background in covering the topic that they have today. I've held lots of different roles in different companies. I'll give you kind of the short tour. I am Canadian, right, where that's worse. And I started off my career actually doing field services for all of the province of Ontario, which meant I drove around a lot to lots of different remote places to do field support for a lot of different clients. And that's kind of where I had a lot of systems architecture type background. I moved from that into more of a network and APM type role at Opnet Technologies. How many of you are familiar or use the product sets that are under the Wiley umbrella at CF? Just a quick show of hands. So that product is something that I'm very familiar with in a similar space, and also the NetQoS type technologies on the network analysis side. I've got some pretty deep experience on that side. And I had a role at Manage Objects where I was exposed a lot to business service management and covering a lot of different technology types, such as service catalog, service request management, talking about portfolio management, those types of technologies as well, and service desk and general operations tools will be covered there as well. And now I'm at xMatters, and you'll hopefully at the end of this session, if I do a halfway decent job, you'll have some idea of what we do as well. But I've got a pretty broad array of experience across the IT management space. I'm sure you guys didn't come here to hear all about me. Really what I like to do is to have a pretty broad session that would cover a couple of key topics. I do need an agenda to keep me on track. I'm normally all over the place. But today's agenda is actually pretty simple. I want to just go over a little bit of background about what xMatters does. That's probably about 5 minutes worth of discussion. I really want to talk about what our clients see in our technology. And really independent of that, I want to talk about why communication can be such an important part of your IT management strategy and where it can add value. And we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session. We do have a giveaway at the end of this particular session, I believe. Charity, keep me honest, it's $1,000. So apparently I'm not allowed to keep my Vegas winnings, so I have to turn it over to Charity, and she's just giving it away. It's gratitude for her. So just a little bit of background, right? So I'm sure most of you have fairly deep experience in lots of different IT management disciplines. I look at them as kind of being assembled in layers. So you pick any different specialized technology class, whether you look at network management and you assemble that up all the way from capturing SMP traps to pulling MIBs, capturing syslog data, or on a server you're capturing performance data, asset information, putting it all together in various layers, you essentially tend to build up your IT management strategy from the ground up. You talk about raw infrastructure, putting together lots of different pieces of information together to form different layers. And all the different areas essentially you put together to build out different combined IT management machines, if you will, right? And they're made up of lots of different tools, lots of different moving parts, and all those pieces essentially change themselves over time. So your overall IT management strategy will change based on lots of different factors. If, let's say, you're dealing with a new technology cycle change, like this new thing I just heard about for the first time this week called cloud something, never heard of that before, right? So those types of things tend to have disruptive changes. If you're dealing with a new governance model, if you're going down a CMMI path, if you're going down a process change or an ITIL path, or even something sometimes driven by events that are at the company level, a merger or an acquisition, management changes. You have a new CIO who has a different approach to taking things. So your overall IT management strategies tend to change over time. What does stay the same in a lot of cases is one of the most important aspects of that structure, which is essentially the head of your IT management machines, which are the people, right? So various folks that have specialized skills, knowledge of your environment, how all various things operate, that tends to stay pretty consistent. So you have at the top level, you've got your people. And I'm sure you hear this cliche all the time, people are the most valuable asset. When it comes to IT management, that actually tends to be very true because you have a lot of specialized and tribal knowledge that you build up over time. The people that know how to manage your environment best are the ones who've been there, tied to the applications, are tied to your infrastructure, to the environment, how the place actually works. Over time, that tends to be a pretty important piece of information that they share. And that really is an area where xMatters focuses. So our focus is not on managing infrastructure. So if you said,
don't worry, this is not a drill.
I see.
Thank you for coming to the xMatters presentation back here. Great job, officer. So I thank everyone for wearing their xMatters shirts today. If you're wearing an xMatters shirt, stand up real quick and we're going to hit you with a gift card. Thank you.
I would feel bad about not wearing that.
Don't make me put the sirens back on. Yes. So last person here, so good one. Any questions for us? If you want to know any secrets about boss? He's a good singer. Good. Keep it going. Okay. Good luck today, everybody.
And by way of very casual introduction, that was my boss, the CEO of xMatters, Troy McAlpin. We're apparently a whole group of pros, right? You see where I get my cases. I don't have a very high standard to live up to. Right. So we're talking a little bit about kind of the top of the stack of your IT management organization, which are the people, right? So if you come to me and say, hey, what do you guys do in terms of managing our infrastructure? Well, do you have an APM product? Do you have a portfolio management solution? What do you do with service catalogs? Turns out our technology has nothing to do with the actual day-to-day technology solutions you use, other than when those technology solutions need to get a hold of people. That really is what xMatters is all about. So if you really look at the core thing that we do as an organization, we're in the business of taking all the disparate information you have about the people in your organization that are responsible for managing the environment. So who's on call when, what their skills are, what their location is, what they actually cover, what specialized infrastructure skills, the technology skills that they have, who's their backup, when are they on vacation, if they're not available, who do you go to, who's their backup for change management versus incident management. Think of all the places where you have knowledge about your people. How many of you maintain on-call schedules in things like spreadsheets and SharePoint or wiki pages? Just raise hands. It's not uncommon, right? So you have that data in one place. How many of you have your contact information for people, like their email addresses, phone numbers, cell phone numbers, etc., stored in Active Directory? Right? A lot of people, right? Why is it that knowing who's available to cover any given issue, who their backup is, what the escalation rules are, and their contact information, why is that all in separate places, and why is that separate than your actual IT management systems themselves, right? It's because that's historically, that's how it's been done, right? So I did field support for a long time. I worked in a NOC for a long time. If I needed someone, I had a very clear set of steps that I went through in my organization. I'd say, okay, we have an issue, who's responsible? Flip over my run book, I go over through it, and I basically run through and say, okay, it's this team, on this team right now, here's a person on call, I pick up the phone, I call them. They don't answer, I say, well, I'll leave a message, give them 10 minutes and I'll call back later, right? If that doesn't work, who's their backup? And I go through a cycle over and over again. That's a common way of reaching out to connect with people, right? The odds are, there's probably some people in there who aren't responsible for the thing you think they're responsible for anymore. The odds are you don't have the right cell phone number for someone when you reach out to them. It's all sorts of breakdowns in that process. And really what the xMatters systems are about are connecting to your IT management systems, capturing all that people data in one place and making it automated. So let's say your process calls for every time that you have a Sev1 issue, you have a conference call to ITSM, assemble with a multiple disciplinary team, a network person, a server person, a data person, an app person, put them all in a conference call, and let's figure this thing out. That's what your process calls for. Why is it that you have to have an incident manager manually kick off the process and hunt people down? It takes a half hour to assemble. Does it make sense? You should be able to hit a button, everyone's connected and place into the call automatically, and you have a full log of who's coming and going to that activity. Right? That's really the focal point of our activities. Every time any of your IT management tools, processes need people, that's basically where we come into play. And as we're doing that type of activity, you log it in the system of records so you can actually see what's going on. That's a really short version of what we do. If you come by the booth, we can talk about it in all kinds of more detail. I really want to talk about why this is important. Right? So what is the actual end deliverable that you get after deploying what we refer to as IT relevance engines in your environment and connecting to your IT management strategy? And by the way, this is not exactly how I normally sound. My voice is a little bit hoarse after being in Vegas for a few days. I'm sure most of you can probably attest to this point as well. So one of the key things that we talk about when we really focal point of our relevance engines is that if you want to solve a problem quickly, there typically is a person or a small group of people who are the key to making it happen very quickly, right? That's why we assemble under severity 1 conditions. That's when we assemble the best of the best, if you want to call it that, right? A war room, on a SWAT call, on a conference calls. That's why we bring them together, because they solve problems, right? If there's a particular, if there's someone who's in field support and they're covering a location, you get it in the right person's hand, that issue is going to get solved much more quickly. For every minute that you wait to engage the right person, that issue is going to keep on, it's going to keep on existing, right? Your mean time to repair is directly correlated to your mean time to respond to get the right person. And that's the key thing that we talk about. Doesn't matter when you need them on a conference call, person in the right location, skills, that's really very important. Now, there's also another key thing that we recognize, which is, and I'll leave this up here so you guys can enjoy the little XKCD comment. I'm a big fan, which is why I use them everywhere. But one of the key things that we also talk about is the folks who you have in your organization that solve problems, they're highly skilled, they're smart, they're essentially heroes. When you engage them in the right place, they get things done, right? They're the guys that pull an all-nighter to fix a bad patch that was rolled out there. They'll work 20 hours in a row to get key applications back online when things go wrong. So why is it that on your on-call rotations or your notifications, why do you wake them up in the middle of the night if they don't need to be woken up, if they're not the right person? Why do you wake up 4 of them if you only need 2? What's the deal with that, right? And it's because it's easy to do. You have mass notification tools. You reach out to them, you're like, it turns out we don't really need you, go back to bed. Sure, your wife's ticked off that everyone was there, that the whole house got woken up, but that's all right, it's kind of part of the gig, right? One of the key things that we talk about is when you have focused communication in your environment, the raw volume of notifications you send out should actually drop. You shouldn't see more communication, you should see less of it, but it's targeted and more effective. How many of you actually deal with day-to-day operations or support issues? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. How many of you get emails or some kind of notification from those management systems? I'd assume the same group of people, right? How many of them do you actually completely ignore? How many of you have filters in Outlook that take that stuff and just throw it right away? I used to do it all the time, right? Which is, you know what? These notifications, I'm on everything, right? I get all the things. When I get a notification, it doesn't mean that it's for me. It means there's something going on in our IT environment. Now, are you really surprised when there's an infrastructure event that something is going on? No, something breaks every day, breaks every hour. I deal with organizations that have 10,000 events a day, right? Do I really need to know about every single one? No, I need to know about the ones that matter to me, the ones that I'm responsible for fixing. And that's really one of the key things that we talk about is engaging just the right people. That's really the core focal point and the first of my top 7 list. One of the questions I actually should have answered earlier is, why on earth did I choose a top 7 list to begin with? Because it's really hard to come up with really 10 really good things. If I did 5, you guys would be like, I'm talking for an hour, he's got 5 things. It's pretty lazy, right? The 7 was the healthy balance that I kind of tried to strive for there. So that's number 1. One of the other key things I have to talk about is communication channels that you have at your disposal. How many of you received, you see, I got a number of hands that said get notifications from your systems. How many of you only get emails, or an email that's forwarded to your cell phone as a gigantic 8-part text message? How many of you get those types of broad messages from your management systems? Just emails, right? By a fair number. That's true, because every management system you own today, guaranteed it's got the ability to send an email, right? It's just, you gotta have that capability. The reality is, that's really not the only communication channel we have at our disposal. How many of you in the room have a smartphone? Quite a few, right? How many communication channels are available to you on that device? I can get a phone call, I can get text messages, it's all an app, I can get push messages, I can respond to things. I get updates on coupons, Foursquare alerts, Facebook messages, Twitter messages, everywhere I go. So why is it that the core part of my job, and one of the reasons I actually was given a smartphone to begin with, why is it that thing simply gets crazy emails that I've actually learned to completely ignore and filter away? It doesn't make any sense, right? I'm carrying this great communication tool, and yet for my core day job, it actually doesn't deliver anything to me. I have all sorts of other communication ways to reach me, and they can be prioritized, right? Here's how I look at it, how I look at the hierarchy of communication in my life. If I get an email, it's kind of important, I gotta deal with it at some point, right? If I get a text message, I can deal with that anywhere, right? It's nice, quick, short, I can deal with that very, very easily. But if my phone actually rings, that's probably the least used communication vehicle on my smartphone. And what it usually means is it's important, because I'll normally hear like the Darth Vader soundtrack come on, and it's my wife calling, right? I gotta deal with that. I have to answer the phone, there's just no way to avoid it. And that's really where it comes in, is you can actually prioritize the issue based on the communication channels as well. And it's something that we encourage people to do. It's for general heads up type stuff. Emails are fine. If you need someone more urgently, send a text message. Or if the phone rings and it's basically xMatters called on behalf of your service desk, it probably means it's pretty important. Otherwise your phone wouldn't be ringing. But that's how the rules should be set up to engage you. So that's one of the key things that we talk about is don't rely on just email. That's silly. We have so many different communication channels at our disposal. Why on earth would we simply say that it's good enough for the management systems that we spend millions of dollars on, and I do know some of the CA prices, so you do spend millions of dollars. All those systems actually do have the ability plugged into a communication system to actually reach out to you the best ways that you can actually be contacted. So that's number 2. How many of you have, well, we talked about smartphones, how many of you also carry around tablets, iPads, Zooms, Kindle Fires? Who's got a Kindle Fire? Anyone order one? See 1, 2? I'd like a review at some point, please. I'll share my email address and considering one as well. So we have all these great mobile devices, and we look at these things, we're like, well, why is it that for all of these systems, why is it I'm actually looking at them as simply a toy, right? So why is it that my management systems aren't available to me on those devices? So if I get an alert that pops up on my device, let's take an alert from Spectrum, or I get a ticket from the service desk that comes to me, why is my next logical step to go power up my computer or go call someone to get more details? Imagine if this is the way email worked. I got an alert, right? So let's use email as a common channel. I got an email from my management system, and I couldn't actually reply to the email or do anything with it to actually get more detail. The only thing I could do is pick up the phone and call someone. How would that work? Every email reply requires a phone call. Does it make sense? You want to have interactive access to the underlying systems, and mobile access can actually deliver it to you. We can talk about some more detail if you'd like, and I can show you guys some demos and stuff later as well. But one of the core things that we talk about mobility is when you actually are contacted, there's never going to be enough information in the initial engagement page or notification. You need some more information, whether it's simply to actually get more detail or actually fix the problem for where you are. And maybe you use orchestration or automation tools in your environment to actually work on combinations. See only a few hands. How cool would it be for those systems where if you actually got a message, you could take a look at it, get enough problem details, and access your actual automation systems on your mobile device and take care of common steps that you'd want to get over there. Even simple diagnostic steps like the next thing I'm going to do is, if it's a network issue, I'm going to run a series of network tests. I'll run a couple of trace routes, some pings, I'll ask for a log file, get me the latest syslog messages from the network device. Kind of cool to be able to do that on my smartphone, right? Or my iPad, or my Zoom, or my Kindle Fire. Those are the things you want to be able to do with your mobile devices. I think it's important to think of the mobile tools we take for granted in our personal lives and actually extend them into what we do day to day. One of the cool things I could talk about is the actual structure of communication. One of the things that I like to talk about is 2 paths of communication take place for any sort of IT issue. You've got the one path that deals with actually resolving the problem, right? And the other path is keeping people in the know. For that, I like to leverage my 1980s upbringing in cartoon history and reference G.I. Joe, right? Knowing is half the battle. Every time an issue occurs, how many of you actually have to have a whole communication process that notifies executives, business stakeholders, customers of what's actually going on? Just a quick show of hands. That process, for most companies I talk to, tends to be kind of manual, right? So when something goes wrong, you have a whole separate process that says, okay, if this goes wrong, I have a distribution list, I'm going to send it off to a bunch of people and give them a heads up that something's taking place, and you provide updates using those channels. But that mechanism is actually a little bit divorced from the reality of what's happening in real time in your environment and requires manual intervention. Also, the approach of broadcasting information out, you're going to miss people. Someone's going to say, why didn't anyone tell me about that? Or, can you tell me about that next time? Or, hey, you guys send me too many messages, I don't pay attention to those things anymore, right? So people either want to be in the know or they don't want to be in the know, and it's too much or too little either way. One of the things we like to talk about is having the ability for people to actually get informational updates based on their role. So if I'm basically an executive and I want to actually get information about an issue as it takes place, I want to find out what's actually going to happen without disrupting the process. So when I used to do field support, this was my favorite problem to have. My favorite, not my favorite, which was I'm actually working on a given problem, and my managers keep calling me asking for status updates. So I'm working on a problem that's crazy, it's hairy, I'm like, neck deep in log files trying to figure out what's going on, and my cell phone keeps ringing with someone saying, hey, can I get the latest status update on that issue? You know what, that drives me crazy, right? Now they want to know, but it's not exactly fun for this type of thing. I thought this kind of captured that feeling pretty well, which is, it's great for my managers to want to know exactly what's going on, but it doesn't always get me the information that I need. So one of the key things we talk about is how do you actually inform people who want to know about the latest happenings without it being a disruptive process. Now I saw a lot of hands for conference calls when asked about how many of you have conference calls for dealing with high severity issues. How many of you have dealt with managers, business stakeholders, people who aren't going to help with the actual work of resolving it, jumping onto those calls in the middle of it and saying, hey, this is Abbas joining, can I get a status update on what's going on right now? Just a quick show of hands, how many of you guys get that? How much fun is that, right? You're sitting there going, oh, really? Now we can't really work on this issue, there's no more cursing allowed on the phone. You gotta have cursing when you're diagnosing things. How are you gonna do that when someone's on the phone? A couple of ways of providing interactive updates. You can actually train relevance engines to notify people who are either consumers of or managers of services. They can actually get updates as the underlying systems are updated. Or, there's actually another way we can do it, is actually you can use some of the mobile interfaces to build out specific mobile capabilities for them to have access to what's actually taking place. And that's all about keeping people informed, right? So they actually know what's going on, they feel connected to the process. So mobility can be used in two ways. One is by field personnel, or folks who are actually working on issues to provide updates into your management systems from wherever they are, without having to call in and say, hey, can you update the tickets with this information? I can provide those updates in there directly. I can also have kind of an executive management view, if you'd like, in some cases, where I provide limited read-only access to certain parts of your workflow and activity that's taking place. And that can be a view of, show me the workflow. So I get a push message as someone who's an executive, as an example, and it has on there a link in my message that says, anytime there's an update, just click this link. It'll get you the latest real-time updates from our ticket. No need to call to conference calls and ask what's going on. You can get an update every 5 minutes if you'd like, or every hour if that's what you want. But before you do that, just make sure you've got a way for that system to actually be updated, right? Otherwise, it's going to be even worse. That's why mobility, I tend to recommend a two-phase deployment. Deploy it to people that actually fix issues, and then deploy it to people that just want to be in the know. There's a whole other side to keeping people in the loop about what's going on as well. And that's really talking about informing end users and consumers of services. So if you really think about an organization where you have a whole setup of consumers of services, right? So if you use a service catalog, it's a question, how many people use service catalogs and service request management time together? Cool. So you actually have a pretty good idea of who's consuming the service. The example I like to give in this is, it's kind of a personal experience I'm sure most of us have had. So I use, they're a customer of ours, so I'll leave them off the blame game here for a second. But I use a cable company for all my internet, phone, and TV services at home. There's outages every little while, right? We have storms. I live in Maryland. We had a couple of major winter storms and crazy thunderstorms that took out a lot of our infrastructure. When a service outage occurs, I feel very annoyed when I have to call the same cable provider, wait on the phone, and then get the message that says, oh yeah, we know there's an outage in your area. and they have no information to give me about when it's going to be back, what the update is. And they're like, and I say, how do I get an update? And they'll say, well, you'll know when things come back on. I'm like, sweet, that's a great way for me. I'll just sit here waiting in front of the TV, just flipping channels, hoping that I see a picture at some point. Or they say, call back and ask me, right? It's crazy. Why do I have to wait on the phone, first of all, to tell them an issue that they know about? And by the way, they know everything about me, right? They have my cell phone number, they have email addresses. Everyone, a lot of people have mobile devices, they know I can get information about it. So why is it that when there's a service outage, I have to basically call them and tell them and have them tell me, oh yeah, we know about the issue? How does service perception change in our own personal lives? Anytime there's a service that we consumed, if it was out, someone sends us a quick message that says, heads up, we know there's a problem. Switch to a backup plan, or we don't have any more information, but we'll tell you when things are either back or online, or when we have more information to begin with, right? It's a whole different service perception, right? An outage for an hour, where you were proactively told that it's going to take some time to be fixed, feels very different than when you're waiting there, trying to tell someone, and they tell you they already know about the outage. That's the other side of this, right, is using service impact alerts to actually improve the perception of service quality, right? It doesn't matter whether the actual service availability changes at all. All you're really doing is simply changing the perception of it by communicating more effectively. One of the other things I talk about is communication consolidation. So I would guess all of your management systems independently have notification systems that use different distribution lists, different communication systems, etc. Now, if I'm a network guy, as an example, or a server guy, pick any role you'd like, I fill different roles in lifecycle. I work on project teams, I deal with changes, I deal with incidents, I deal with level 3 support. I may have a shift on the knock. I might even rotate through help desk. I have some organizations that even do that. I've got different roles that occur for the things that I know about. Now, why is it that the tools that need to communicate with me that are part of all those different disciplines, why is it that they all reach out to me independently? So I get crazy emails from one system at one point, I'm not on the right list for the other one. It doesn't make sense. My role as a person in my organization is actually relatively fixed. I've got certain key responsibilities, and regardless of which context I'm needed in, they're all going to be the same. So why is it that every one of those systems has a whole separate notification infrastructure built around it? The example I like to give with this one is one of our customers is Sprint. When we actually went through an analysis in their environment, they had 56 different notification systems for their technology organizations. 56. There's 56 systems that all have some way of reaching out to someone. It's crazy. So every time anyone needs to reach out to someone, either it's an automated blast and message out, or what you're really able to do, or what they have to do is have on-call rules for different types of conditions. You need this person for change, slightly different rule. The escalation rules are different for this team on the weekend. So it's all kinds of different stuff. Every tool different, every process different, all tracked independently. In their case, that tool maintenance itself, just in terms of pure software and infrastructure costs, is about $350,000 a year of just systems that ran and just duplicated efforts on each other, right? That doesn't include all the work that it took to keep all those things up to date, and of course the problems that occur when the information, most of them, is wrong all the time, right? So you want to have it consolidated so you can actually reuse it. That's my equivalent of a green IT message. It's as close as I can get. That's really kind of the core pieces here, right? Is if you have all this stuff in one place, you can actually use it across multiple processes, different tools, different organizations. One of the other interesting things about having a centralized notification system is that you can actually hide things that you want to hide, right? So, how many people took a second to realize there's a cat in the middle of that picture? You guys notice that? Right? It's a little tricky. I kind of like this picture. I had to find some way to sneak it in there. It took me a second to learn first. I was like, I don't get it. Is this dog camouflage with the floor? No, it's a cat. That's the key. So behind this process is really kind of a key story. Now imagine if I have all my communication from my management systems centralized in one place. So most people are interacting with the system